Welcome back. Well, this is my second segment in my scope selection series of videos. Be sure to watch them all because I'm cutting this up into bite-sized pieces so that you can just focus in, not to make a pun, but so that you can focus in on the particular issues that are involved, and they're multiple. By far, the most popular, most often asked question that I get is, what power should I buy? And that's probably the most important question too. If you leave it up to the store clerk in your local box store, he's going to feed you the most powerful scope that you can buy, because he's going to convince you that power is directly related to somehow prestige or something like that. You know, he's going to start at the top end of the shelf and he's going to move down until he hits the gong, and you can open up your wallet and buy whatever he wants to sell you. I've been seeing some ridiculous scopes sitting in these glass cases. Now, if you're a target shooter, the sky is the limit. You know, the most important thing is to buy a scope which you're comfortable with. If you're a target shooter, anything that you want to buy for power range is fine, because you're looking at a fixed image that doesn't move. And this applies to shooting tin cans or shooting at bullseye targets or ringing gongs or whatever you want to do. Whatever power range suits you is fine. You know, there is no top end. If you're a hunter, the most important thing of all is resolution. Remember that. It's not power, it's resolution. It's what you can see clearly. It's not how powerfully you can see it, it's what you can see most clearly. Anybody who, looks at the stars, any astronomer will tell you that astronomy scopes are relatively low power, considering what you're looking at way out there. You're looking at planets and stars and nebula and all that stuff. They're very, very low power compared to what most people would assume goes along with such long range, sighting. Well, it's all because they use super resolution. Scopes that can they draw in enough light so that they can take photographs, long time shots and things like that. I'm talking about setting up time exposures that can go on for hours. But that's what they do with motorized telescopes that they don't follow the stars. They basically compensate for the spinning of the Earth. So anyway, that's getting off topic. Resolution is the most important thing of all. So a good quality scope. This is why some of the money that you pay is important when you're buying a high grade scope, a name brand scope, is because you're buying good. You're not only buying good glass, well-polished optics and things like that, and they're nicely ground, and they present a nice flat image from side to side and with crispness all the way to the edge with no shadows. But you're also paying a considerable amount for the type of lens coatings that they put on. As far as what power to buy, it's most important that you assign your power according to your lowest power. Now, the same goes if you're a varmint shooter. If you do nothing with a rifle except shoot, woodchucks, prairie dogs, field mice, or if you want to do a dental check on a woodchuck at 300 yards, you can get yourself a 24 power scope or something and have at it. There's no problem with that. There's no limit. Whatever you can afford. You may want to have Back in the day when I was buying my loophole scopes, the higher power ones were all fixed power, like the 16s and the 24s and stuff like that. And I had some issues sometimes with a 16 power scope when I was within, sometimes the woodchuck was out there at 100 yards. I had issues trying to find him at 100 yards sometimes. And if he started trotting off across the grass, I had a really hard time following him, where I didn't have any issues at all with my Seiko Vixen, which only had an M8 model loophole on it with 7.5 power. I could always pop them as they were running along at 150 or 200 yards. So there is some issues when it comes to varmint scopes, but these days most of your top power scopes are variable, so you can crank them right down to 4 or 5 power or something like that. But for the most part, the hunter, I'm not talking strictly about deer hunting, I'm talking about all hunting, requires that you look at the low power. Do not look at the high power, look at the low power. That's what you're buying. Your high power really doesn't make any difference. Your high power setting, with as little as 4 power, you can shoot an antelope at 400 yards, guaranteed. You might not be able to see as clearly, exactly where you are on the antelope at that range or anything, and you may not be able to tell, what sizes his horns are at that range with a 4 power scope. But you'll hit them. There's no problem about that whatsoever. You'll hit them. The military uses low power scopes, and they're shooting. There's no limit to how much distance that a soldier or Marine has to shoot. So that's not the issue. The CMP, as a matter of fact, requires that you have, I believe it's 4.5 power is the limit, and you're shooting at hundreds of yards, up to 600 yards. So that's not an issue whatsoever. Don't worry about the high power. You'll have plenty. Look at the low power and see that and make sure that your low power is sufficiently wide a field of view. And that's the thing that most people don't attend to. They don't pay attention to your field of view that's necessary for close-in hunting. What is your close-in potential? If you're a Western hunter, if you're hunting always in the open plains and things like that, and you really your days going into the woods are few, if any, you can go as low as 3 or 4 power on your low setting, and you're fine. There's no issue with that whatsoever. And the top setting is whatever you want to make it. So with the 3 power, you can have 3 to 9, 2 to 10. That's one of the higher end scopes because it's getting outside of that normal power range. You're adding some extra power. You're adding about another 2 power in it. 2 power to 10 power is a much broader range than 3 to 9. So you're paying for that. Also pay attention to your size. Don't get too carried away because you got to tote that thing around all the time. And higher powers require, and they come equipped with, not that you necessarily require it, but they come equipped with increasingly larger objective bells. The objective bell is the end, is this end here towards the muzzle. As the objective bell gets bigger, it may require that you put in higher rings. Higher rings means that you may lose your cheek weld, and that's a really bad thing. I'd rather take a shot with 3 power at 300 yards with a good cheek weld than to lose my cheek weld so I can get another 4 or 5 power. That's not what you want to have, because you lose your cheek weld, you're just going to be floating around trying to figure out where you are, or you have to buy yourself some sort of a cradle to go across the top to put your cheek on. So that's important, and that's what a lot of people fail to take note of when they walk into a box store and the clerk, starts putting these big scopes on the bench. Watch out for that. Watch out for your size. The size of your scope means a lot when you're at altitude. I mean, if you're a young person and you don't mind carrying around another 5 or 6 ounces or something like that, and you're down low, whatever you want to buy. But again, everything comes with a price. There's no compromises when it comes to scopes. I mean, as things get bigger, they get bigger. And as field of view goes down, it means that you don't see as much. There's quite a difference in the field of view of a 2 power scope versus a 1 power scope. I mean, it can be double. And when you're in the woods, if you're an eastern hunter, and if you're in the woods, you want to have, classically, you want to have 1 to 2 power. You don't want to go beyond 2 power in the woods. This 3 to 9 scope, I've put this on a rifle And I've gone, I mean, I'm speaking because I did this as a personal test. I put this on a rifle and I went into the woods and I put it up. I couldn't see anything. If there was any deer within any of the normal ranges that I would be finding a deer, I wouldn't find a thing in there. All I'm looking at is trees. Now, I know that there are places, when I'm saying eastern hunters, I know that I'm speaking also to people who are hunting in mature forests where, you know, you have these long views, you know, these magnificent views of deer, you know, at 75 and 80 yards and things like that. Well, we don't have that here. So when I'm speaking to somebody who's, you know, a northeastern hunter who's hunting in thick maple groves and oaks intermingled with you know, lots of young saplings and things like that that are at your chest level high or high up, what we call whips. You know, you're in that stuff. You don't see 45 yards, let alone shoot a deer at 45 yards. Most of your deer are shot within 30, 35 yards. A great many deer. I would say that most of the deer that I've, you know, seen taken by other people and myself, I mean, they're rooms, they're like the distance of a room away. You know, you're talking about 12, 15 yards at the most. They happen to step out right there, and they didn't see you and you didn't see them until they're right there in front of you. If you put anything up besides a 1.5 power scope, you're going to have a hard time finding them. It's going to be just basically pointing from your shoulder. So power is something which you shouldn't even be considering when you're in the woods. What you're getting with a scope, with, you know, that you do not get with iron sights, is you get a flat image. A flat image means that, you know, the focal plane of your crosshairs and the image that you're looking at, the deer or whatever, your bear or, you know, whatever it is, your hyena, he's right there and he's right on the same plane, the same image plane. So that's the great advantage of a scope, is that it flattens the image. So power is something which should always be selected according to the low end, not to the high end. So if you're an eastern hunter, I would say look at scopes that can go down to 1 to 1.5 power. And really, that's if that's all you do. If you're just hunting in thick woods, and I'm not talking to somebody like I say who's hunting in wide open, more open forest, that, you know, mature forest where you can look through down these long lanes of trees. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where, you know, where you have to fight your way through, that sort of hunting. That's the sort of hunting we deal with here, and where you know, all of a sudden you're confronting a shot which you really have to have not only a wide field of view to find the animal that may be moving on you, but you've got to be able to find it quickly, like right there and then, and there's no time to waste because he's going to be turning on you. You also have to have, besides just having that, you want to have a crosshair that's good and bold. You want to have something that stands out. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about first and second focal plane scopes, front and rear focal plane scopes. But this is where really at close range you want to have a second or rear focal plane scope, and I'll talk about that later. But that's because you want to have a very bold crosshair in such situations. You don't want to have a faded crosshair which occurs with a front or first focal plane crosshair. So that's important, is to make sure that you have the appropriate type of scope. So keep your power down at those levels, at the low power level, where you have a good wide open field of view. And if you're the all-purpose hunter, if you're the type of person that, you know, is hunting in thick wooded sections, sometimes with the same rifle that you take, you know, out west in the plains and things like that, my favorite rifle for that is my favorite scope for that is a 2.5 or to 8 or 2 to 7 power. 2 to 7, I like that better because that's really a better power range with a little bit wider field of view for woodland hunting. I can get away with 2 power. It's a little bit more than I would prefer for woodland hunting, but I can get away with that on my 257 Roberts and take that out west as well. And so that's a fantastic all-purpose scope. it's easily, a lot of people find that to be the ideal, not only a good all-purpose scope for tight, close-in shooting and, long range, but some people who do nothing but hunt, at long-range prairie shooting, they find that to be just a handy scope. It's very dandy. It's lightweight. It's got a small objective bell, and because it doesn't need to have a big objective bell in order to gather light. We'll talk about that in another segment, but that's just as good as well for the long-range hunter. And I'll tell you, if you're a person who's going after elk or moose or something like that up in the tundra of Canada or elk out in Utah or anything, you're talking about seven power. You're looking at a big animal. This is if I shoot antelope with 7.5 power out to 390, 400 yards, there's no problem at all seeing a beast which is many times larger. So that's plenty. And whatever you do, do not use your scope as a sighting instrument for locating game. That is really inappropriate, and it can be a grievous mistake. You don't want to be looking at somebody. You don't want to be looking at a person that you see movement out there, and you put your rifle scope up, and with a rifle with a dangerous weapon, you're looking at another person out there. That's the last thing you want to be doing. Scan the horizon with binoculars. Binoculars should be something which is what you're using to locate game. You can use a spotting scope. If you're a trophy hunter and you want to count points on elk or things like that, then you need to have a spotting scope that has a lot of resolution, big objective lens, and that you can peer into distant places. You sometimes you'll see elk maybe 1,500, 1,600 yards away. Even with a spotting scope, you're really not going to get much of a look at his antlers from that distance. But as soon as you can, that's the type of scope that you should be using for that. Do not ever assume that your rifle scope is something that you're going to locate game with, because that's totally inappropriate, and it's not only very unethical, it's extremely dangerous. You're really liable to upset somebody if they look back at you and with a pair of binoculars, and you're looking at them with a rifle. Not a good thing to do at all. So, for all my Patreon donors, thank you so much for your help and your assistance. And for everybody, make sure you hit the thumbs up button, and stay tuned. I'll be bringing you more information about selecting rifle scopes. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. God bless.